The following segment is sponsored by Daniel A. White and Associates. It does not necessarily reflect the views of WDEL or Forever Media.
Stay up to date. Keep it here for Delaware's afternoon news starting at 2. Now, back to the Rick Jensen Show on WDEL.
So, every Wednesday after the news at 1:30, we get some good advice, good tip from Dan White and or one of his associates at Dan White and Associates. Financial planners specializing in retirement income. Andrew Wood is on the phone right now. Great guy. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Rick. Thanks for having me.
Sure. No, I'm glad you called in. So, like I said, every Wednesday you guys have a great tip for us. What do you have for us today?
Sure. So, I'll tell you a little story before we get into things. But, I went to school. I basically was following my sister's footsteps, who's a doctor, and I thought I was going to be a doctor. And I ended up dropping out of the pre-med program at the school that I went to, and I was looking for things to do, and in terms of like what was my career going to be and all this kind of stuff. And there was a statistic that kind of shocked me, and I realized that people really need help, and they're going to need help over the upcoming years. So this is early 2000s. But the statistics was that 10,000 baby boomers are going to be retiring every day for the next. At that point, it was like 25 years.
Wow.
Yeah, so this is a long time ago. But if you look at the numbers, I guess people were busy in 1959. But the reason I say that is
now understand something. Back then, there were only 3 TV channels. So and wait, Andrew, hold on. You got to understand it.
You got my joke. That makes me feel better. But
it is good. And not only that, but my parents, right? You're talking about like my parents. They did not have Netflix. They didn't have anything, and they couldn't sit there and say, "Hey, what do you want to buy from Amazon?" No, basically, if there was nothing on TV, it was like, "How you doing? How you doing? Would you like a drink?" So, yes, that was the 1950s. Got it, dude.
So 1959 was a very busy year because this year, 2024, is when we are hitting our peak in terms of those individuals reaching age 65 this year.
Wow. So
yeah, it's actually 4.1 million Americans this year are poised to turn 65 this year.
So way, way before Will Smith was born, people were getting busy with it.
So here's the thing. I mean, we've had different shows and different tips and regarding like key retirement ages and things like that. And 65 is obviously one of them.
Yeah.
Now it's important to understand that if you were born in 1959, all right, so if you're turning 65 this year, your full retirement age for Social Security, and that's when you can basically receive your full benefit, not your maximum benefit, but your full benefit. It's not age 65. If you were born in 59, it's going to be 66 and 10 months. So if you were born again in 1959, your full retirement age is 66 and 10 months. That's when you can get your full benefit, not your maximum, but you're not penalized because because you're not taking early.
May I ask a question, as I often do?
Sure.
In your studies, and I know that you're a reader, you're a studier. Have you ever encountered the reason for the extra 10 months?
No, I mean, I'm sure it has to do with the actuarial tables. They pushed it back. If you were born in 1960 or later, it's 67, and they're looking at pushing it back to 70. I'm sure it's the solvency issue they keep talking about, and Social Security being solvent, remaining solvent for the foreseeable future. So I think it has to do with actuarial tables. And here's the other thing, and if you think about the solvency issue, that's one of the reasons, this whole, peak 65 thing, over the last 2 years, the Social Security Trust Fund is actually run a deficit. Now, that doesn't mean, there's plenty of money there, but they don't have a surplus, meaning it's not growing.
Right.
They're paying out more benefits than what they're bringing in. And again, that number is only going to get worse because, in this year, we've got a record number of people hitting 65. So, yeah, but my understanding has to do with the solvency issue and actuarial tables.
Oh, see? Like I said, I'm not. I'm never, in fact, never disappointed when I ask you a question like that. Thank you. All right. So, have you lost your place now, or I'm sorry if I threw you off?
So the first thing I wanted to go through was full retirement age.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you turn 65 this year, that's not your full retirement age. It's going to be 66 in 10 months. The second thing is 65 is typically when you want to enroll in Medicare, and that's dependent on whether or not you're still working for an employer who still has health benefits for you. So 65 is a critical year, for Medicare. Just check to see if you do have to enroll, whether it's Part A or Part B. We have a specialist that specifically handles that.
Kirsten?
All right. That is right. That's Kirsten. She's a specialist when it comes to that. She's helped a ton of people, helping with the decisions regarding Medicare.
I've talked with her quite a few times. She's great, brilliant, and oh my gosh, a lot of energy, and she's smart. I like her.
Yeah, she does an awesome job. Now, the last thing I want to point out, again, you look at 65, and for some reason, maybe it's because, at one point 65 was the full retirement age for Social Security, but, people look at this age and it's like, that is usually the goal that I see. They want to work to 65. Now, it's important to understand that just because you turn 65 doesn't necessarily mean you need to, number one, retire fully. If you do retire, it doesn't necessarily mean that you do need to tap into your Social Security, again, especially if you have retirement savings. But you got to figure out what you're going to do with your retirement savings. So if you haven't yet retired and you're approaching whether it's 65 or if you want to retire in the next few years, again, you got to figure out what you're going to do to leverage your retirement savings to make sure that when you do retire, that you can replace income, that you can generate income in retirement. And that income needs to be there for as long as you live. So you got to figure out, what your bills, expenses are, things like that. Look at your sources of income in retirement and coordinate a plan that gets you to where you need to be.
I saw this poll recently, and they were polling millennials, asking them about retirement. Mm-hmm. A majority of millennials are set upon retiring at the age of 55. 55, not 65, 55. And they also believe they need like $1.6 million to retire. Yet, on average, millennials have less than a couple $100,000 in their retirement funds. And I wonder, how realistic is that? And here you are, learned and educated and working in this field every single day. I think I would ask you, how realistic is that?
Well, I was actually thinking about bringing this up today, and it, just based on recent studies, they talk about this number that you need to hit, what you're referring to. Like, I think the number right now is $1.3 or $1.4 million. Now, what they don't take into consideration when they're using these, there's these reports and they're doing these surveys is that, they're not really looking at expenses. They're not looking at where you live, right? They're not looking at other sources of income, whether you have a pension or not. All these things really need to be factored in, to that overall. Now, I will tell you for millennials, I think, is it to retire at that early?
Yeah.
On that amount of money?
Yeah.
I would say it's going to be challenging. Because again, what are your sources of income going to be? Unless you're building some kind of residual income or some kind of income that's coming in, because if you're not even eligible to receive any kind of Social Security until at least 62, right? If you don't have a pension, like, what are you going to live off of?
Unless they feel like their side hack is going to be, that's just something I do when I retire, but you're still going to work doing your side gig or something. I don't know. Yeah. It didn't get into that.
Right, and most of these studies don't, because it's much more complicated than a simple answer is is it going to be enough to live off of, because they're not looking at big picture everything. But yeah, if you're looking at having some kind of residual income, maybe rental income, what are people making money off of these days?
Well, you're right.
TikTok,
That's a good
Instagram.
point right there. But unfortunately, I mean, I don't want to get too much in the weeds here, but unfortunately, too many people who are getting elected to city councils, things like that, are making it difficult, if not impossible, to be a good, honest, small business owner that has rental income. It's just they just make it very, very difficult, and the federal government's not helping much either. So, so good luck with that. But anyway, but getting back to this, so 1959, being 65 and getting Social Security is nowhere near the same as being 70 and taking your Social Security, is it?
Correct. Yeah. So again, you're penalized actually if you take your benefit at 65. So for every month that you take prior to your full retirement age, so if you were born in, and again, 1959, it's 66 and 10 months. Every month that you take prior to that, it's a fractional reduction to your benefit amount. So you're penalized if you take your Social Security at 65. If you take it at your full retirement age, you get your full benefit. And if you wait until 70, you get a fractional increase for every month that you delay. So it is a pretty significant increase. It ends up being, what's that? So 2 months, 2/3. I mean, you're looking at least a 26% difference, 26 to 30% difference.
That's a big number. And if you're thinking, oh, I get $3,000 a month for Social Security, but then the 26% on top of that, that's real money.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and it can make a huge difference, again, especially for most retirees that are living on a somewhat fixed income.
Yeah, there's going to be a limit. Absolutely. Well, see, the thing is, you guys work these things out. And in addition to that, when you work these things out, you also make plans on estimating, maybe forecasting, guesstimating taxes in the future, inflation, that sort of thing. I mean, and I don't know if any financial planner back, say, in 2018 said, well, we're going to plan for 18% inflation in the next half dozen years, So, I mean, the best of the best, I don't think we're actually making that very specific prediction. So you're right. I mean, there's so many variables involved. What do you do? And right now I saw another survey showing that 25%, 25% of baby boomers who are retired are either going back to work, looking to get back to work, applying for a job, or thinking about getting back to work. 25% are saying, yeah, I need to get back to work. And that includes those who have been successful in finding a job and those who have not yet been successful in finding a job. So to your point, you wait as long as you can to max out, right?
Yeah, as long as you can. You don't necessarily want to go broke in the process, but
No.
If you have the assets and you got to coordinate a plan. You got to make sure you have enough income. And I think the two words that I use are cash flow. Making sure you have enough income to pay your bills and do the things that you want to do. So it's about coordinating a plan to generate the cash flow that you need.
Yeah, I'm thinking eat and buy house cleaning products. Those are basics. I'll start with those. You didn't expect that house cleaning products to be part of that, did you? I know. I really enjoyed talking with you because, like me, you have a pretty goofy sense of humor. But unlike me, you have deep knowledge of this, and it's always beneficial. Hey, on Sunday mornings, Dan White hosts On the Money with a lot of insights into financial planning for your future. And, folks, even if you feel like, oh, you're talking about financial planning? Man, I can hardly afford groceries and a house. Well, you know what? You need to be aware of the concepts. Seriously, you got to be aware of the concepts. And as a wise man once told me years and years ago, my first job out of college, I said, well, I can't afford to do a 401k. I can't afford to save for retirement. And he said, you can't afford not to. $1. He said, start with $1. Start with $2. Start with $5. Once you get started, you're going to be so glad you did. He was right, and I'm so glad I did. So all of these tips and this knowledge are very meaningful. What's Dan talking about on Sunday morning at 7?
So Sunday's topic is going to be, should you roll your 401k savings into an IRA? Some of the pros and cons of doing that.
And my wife was asking me, hey, honey, do you think we should be doing a Roth IRA? And I thought, well, you pay taxes now, but might be in a higher tax rate now than you are when you retire. And I remember talking with Dan about this for quite a while. And that works for some people, doesn't it?
It does. Definitely not for everybody, but for some people, it will certainly make sense. And we don't know what's going to happen with these tax rates going forward, too. Most people would anticipate the tax rates themselves are likely to go up. I should say the income tax thresholds.
Well, as knowledgeable people say, how often do they go down?
Yeah.
I know, right?
Yeah.
All right, Andrew Wood, Dan White & Associates. Give him a call at 888-690-8820. As you can see, he's great to work with. 888-690-8820. And then Dan White on the money, 7 a.m. Sunday morning, cup of coffee. You're going to learn something. 101.7 FM, 1150 AM, WDEL, streaming live at WDEL.com. Andrew, have a great rest of the week. Thank you very much.
You too. Thanks, Rick. Go Phils.
All right, go Phils. There you go.